cranes, so we've got the I rented their 800 and their 600 that go with it. So
well, give me a shout afterwards. I'd love to hear what you have to say, because you know, I'm not even sure I'm going to do this right away, because, you know, I would be using a mirrorless mostly for light, keeping it light and keeping it in a travel situation.
It's definitely lighter than my Nikon gear, that's for sure. But did you see Nikon announce?
Yeah, but having the, you know, D5, I'm not sure. I mean, that's already flagship there. And for portraits, I'll stay with that. So I'm not, yeah. And then the Sony has their A1, whatever, Alpha, whatever. But I'm not interested in reproducing my $6,000 camera.
That was the next thing I was going to say. It's there. I think the Sony's what, 64, something like that.
Yeah.
And I saw something, and again, this is all speculation or whatever, and that the Nikon Z9 was going to be somewhere. They said somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 or something like that. So it's probably not on my shopping list anytime soon. And
at least not for 10 years.
Could Nikon just keep shooting themselves in the foot, or what? It's ridiculous.
Phil, are those two lenses? Is that fixed aperture lenses?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let me know how those work.
Yeah, I've shot the 800 before. I like it. It's a little clunky to handle because it's kind of like it's almost like a push pull. You got to twist it and extend it to use it, but it's pretty sharp and it's super inexpensive compared to other 800 millimeters. So,
a lot lighter.
But as far as size, Dave, I mean, the size of my camera backpack now is ridiculously small, and I can put my Sony with the 24-105 on it in a small purse. I mean, it's just so light and compact. It's been like a relief when it comes to that part for me.
And for me, that's gonna, you know, I have to kind of just say, what am I going to use it for, right? If it is for travel, then and I'm not worried about attaching lighting gear to it. You know, I mean, definitely the Nikon Z7 II and that Sony, you know, R4 is the lightest ones, the most portable. It's, you know, it just, but you know, then I got to think, am I going to be in a lot of churches where that 61 megapixels is just going to, you know, the focusing at low light just because it's high pixels is going to be bad, you know, or it's going to be less. But how many churches am I going to be in Europe or something like that? You know, I mean, what am I actually going to do with the thing? So, you know, I've always been kind of slanting towards the Sonys because they look cool, and that's they're a huge corporation that can really eclipse everybody else if they really wanted to. But you know, I mean, it's definitely got some disadvantage with different things.
So the Z7 II, let's see here, that with the and that's a 24-70 f4 lens that's on there, but it's pretty stealthy. It's pretty small. It's pretty light. I suppose if you really wanted to go out and be really stealthy, just put a 50 millimeter prime or something like that on there. If you didn't need all the range and so forth, then you could walk around and be.
Well, you know, and for like travel, you want something like a super zoom that you just put on there and don't touch, you know, 24-240 and just leave it, you know. So, I mean, that's one of the advantages of the Sony, because it accepts there's been a couple different manufacturers that are making that kind of super zoom for the Sony that don't make them for the Canons or the Nikons or the Fujifilm. So I don't know. Who the heck knows?
That's right. We'll give it just another minute or two. Looks like we still have a couple people that have just joined in that. So again, welcome everybody. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and launch tonight's program. So
I know Nikon's got a 24-200 for the Z series lenses. It's a 3.5, 5.6, I think, or 6.3 But a lot of people have said that's been a pretty good, like travel type, one lens fits all. The
Yeah.
reviews have been pretty positive on it as far as sharpness and all of that. So
Yeah, the
Yeah,
reviews on all the lenses, on all those Z lenses has been good in terms of just performance and that, but it's just a
Well-
matter of, right.
yeah, and
that-
it's not, I don't think it's an expensive lens. I want to say it's like $800 or, you know.
It's
something
right about
like
900, yeah. And I guess it's, for what it is, it's a really, really, and it's lighter than some of the other ones.
that. Mhm.
And, you know, if things are not, I mean, how fast do I need to track a building? You know what I mean?
Well, the
So,
Nikon makes that 28 to 300. It's a bigger lens, and my wife uses that on her Z7. But it's a pretty much that lens covers a lot of the ground, and it's reason. And even on the Z7, because I was kind of worried she had it on a 750, which is only 20 megapixels, but on the Z7 at 45, it's still good and sharp and usable. It's actually, I was, well, we'll see how this lens works on this body, but it does a great job.
yeah. Now
Well,
that we-
1 second here. I'm going to go. Our furnace I'm down here in the basement. Our furnace just went on. So it's probably pretty noisy. I'm going to go
We
shut
can't
that
hear
down and then
We can't hear it. It's quiet.
Can't hear that.
Nope.
Okay. We'll let it roll. I'll let
You're
it
gonna
keep me
freeze
warm.
everybody out.
So, do you know anything about the hours that the Lone Tree Arts Center is open to see the show now? And is anybody?
Not yet. They haven't said anything yet, so I'm not sure. We were talking about that before everybody got on. And I'll do a follow-up email with Alyssa and see if she can give us more information. She's been working on a big project, so she's has not really paid much attention to the photo show yet. So I think that was concluded this week or had kicked off, and now she had more time. So
And is it the 2020 show or a 2021? I don't understand what they're showing.
no, this one, this was what you call it, Michael? It was like like judges, not judges, but like some kind of I think it was an invite only type show, and she was spent a lot of time on it. So,
Right. They had something going on there right now. I
Commissioner-
can't remember exactly what it was, but
Yeah,
yeah.
commissioner show or something, but yeah, I don't know. They're always trying to do something there. Got to keep the building full.
Try something.
So Dave, I just posted a link that you might find interesting for the Sony as far as shooting buildings and that kind of stuff. They have something called a pixel shift multi-shooting mode that you can use through your iPhone app or your desktop app. And it's kind of like
Tilt shift.
a Helicon focus where it goes through and it takes a certain number of images and it moves a focus point for you in the image. I haven't tried it yet. I just learned about it this weekend. So
Yeah, I read about that. I
consideration,
guess
something
it's
to
pretty good
take a look at.
for stuff that's not moving. That's a really great thing, but it doesn't work with like clouds very well, I heard, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. But yeah, I mean, you can make your files like really enormous.
Okay, I'm gonna start here real quick. So I'm just on my computer for some reason. Whenever I I'm trying to hit on the chat and trying to hit somebody here. I'm trying to admit, and for some reason my cursor won't click. I can't mute myself. I can't stop my video. So, but everybody can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and do that. But just keep in mind, I won't be able to admit anybody or hit the chat button. I don't know what's causing that, but.
No problem.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Once again, thank you everybody for joining tonight. Again, tonight we have a guest, Dale Ralph, is going to be presenting on creating characters from self-portraits. So I'll go a little bit more into her work here at the end of my opening, but really looking forward to seeing your presentation tonight, Dale, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Again, so this is our, let's see, 6th meeting of 2021. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Again, we're obviously still doing these meetings virtually, and that we hope that maybe later in the year and that we'll be able to meet in person, maybe even indoors and that. Again, vaccines are becoming more readily available. Earlier in this chat here, we were talking about it, that I become eligible this Friday. I think there's probably a handful of us here on the screen that either have had the vaccine or will probably hopefully be getting it, or at least have it available to us for those that want it fairly soon. And hopefully that as we do that, then we'll, like I say, be able to meet in person, indoors, whether it be meetings, workshops, events, and so forth. And in the meeting, and I brought this up at the last couple of meetings, and that we're talking internally also about trying to set up some outdoor events. It feels like, at least in small groups, those should be fairly safe, just based on what's going on today, and then as more of the vaccines become available. So just kind of waiting for the weather to get a little bit better than what we had this last weekend, and what sounds like we might get a little bit more of that this next weekend. But maybe as we get into April and May, set up a couple of photo shoots, just again, maybe small groups and at it, whether it's local parks, state parks, or something like that. But if nothing else, it's just fun to see everybody's face in person and get together and go take some pictures. So we're all looking forward to that day that I think is just right around the corner, at least for some of those type of events. Going over a couple of other things that are coming up. It was also just mentioned there, Dave, thank you for bringing it up, the Exploring the Light. That's the event that we have each year over at the Lone Tree Art Center. We've got some communication with Alyssa over there at the center. And so it sounds like that'll probably be here later in March and into April. We'll have the actual submissions for that event. And then I believe, and Bruce can correct me if I'm wrong, but the event will actually be probably on display probably late April into, I think it was going to be like early summer, midsummer, something like that.
Yeah, I think that was right.
Right. And as far as the categories that we've got there, and again, this will all come out in emails as we launch it, formally launch it. But we got a couple of creative topics for this year. And that there will be the typical. We'll have landscape, people, animals, but then a couple of new categories that we've got this year one will be on light painting, and another one will be on drones. So again, for those that are into the light painting and drones, we've got a couple new, a little bit more kind of creative categories. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes in on this year's event. Other things that we've got coming up, let's see here. April 7th will be our next meeting, and that will be a exhibition night. We had a really good exhibition night back in February. For those that are new or for those that haven't attended one of those, it's a really good opportunity to submit 3 or 4 of your images that you want. Not necessarily critique. They're not judged events, so we don't have a judge that's scoring them, but it's an opportunity to present it, kind of give your story, kind of describe maybe a little bit about what you're thinking, what the image means to you, what your processing was, and so forth. And then we do open it up, if you're open to it, and that to have other people just either offer suggestions, maybe things that they would, things that you could think about in terms of whether it's shooting, composition, processing, and so forth. And so I know whenever I've attended these, I've always learned quite a bit just from the commentary and that from some of the other experts in the group. So we'll be doing that. Again, that one is on April 7th. April 21st, we have another presentation. That's going to be Alice Bender is going to be presenting on Impressionist photography. So again, another creative use of photography with creating impressionistic type photographs. May 5th, we have another competition night, and that one will be open. May 19th, we have another presentation. That one is going to be Glenn Randall. He'll be on photographing meteor showers. So again, that meeting is in May. He has a workshop in August when the first meteor shower takes place in that. So he'll be kind of giving some tips in that as to what to think about when you're going out to photograph the meteor showers at night. June 2nd, we have another exhibition night. much like what I just described that we'll also be doing here in May. No, excuse me, in April, April. So April and then June, those are the two exhibition nights. June 16th, Joseph Roybal, a landscape photographer, is going to be presenting on color theory for landscape photography. July, we're going to do a scavenger hunt. This will be the third annual scavenger hunt. Bruce has done a really good job of organizing these the last 2 years. First year we did it in person over at the center, over at the Lone Tree Center. Last year we obviously had to do it virtually, but it was still a really fun event. This year, I don't know, maybe we can talk about this later, but maybe again by July, maybe we can look at having a scheduled location where we do the photographs again, as a scavenger hunt at one location, and then see what we can do about in terms of when we do the presentation of those later on. August 18th, we just booked. We've got Tim Gray. He does a Ask Tim Gray. He's got a daily actually recommendations that he puts out on out through emails and that. I'm really experienced with processing of photographer.
I'm sorry, you didn't want that either? You wanted chicken instead?
So let's see. So Tim Gray, we have that going again on August 18th. And the presentation that he's going to give to our club will be on Photo Pills, popular phone app that's useful for planning in landscape, night photography, sun positions, moon positions, hyperfocal distance, long exposure calculations. Again, I know a lot of landscape photographers use it. I have it, but part of it is just it's a little bit complex, and so I just haven't really got into the really fine uses of it. I've just kind of used some of the basics. But this will be a real good opportunity for those that want to learn how to use Photo Pills better. That event, he's going to be doing that one on his webinar format. What we'll do is we'll do, with our club, we'll do a kind of like what we did tonight, a 30-minute kind of a pre-session where we have the kind of open mics with all of us to just discuss whatever's going on. And then we'll flip it over to his webinar platform and go forward with that. Again, that's August 18th. September 1st will be another competition night. September 15th, we've got our 2020 Photographers of the Year award winners, Ashley and Carino. Carino's on here tonight to present, kind of give a bit of a history of how they, how quickly they become really proficient at photography. Keep in mind that the two of them won our big awards last year after each of them had only been photographing for less than 2 years at that point. So this will be a good opportunity for us to kind of learn how they were able to get so successful so quickly. So do that one in September 15th. And then the rest of the later events through the year and that we're still working on a couple of the presentations and competition nights that will finish that out. Another thing that I do have here that is that I got notification of was the Louisville Club up, I guess just outside of Boulder. They have a call for entry that's open right now, and that's again a show for similar to like our Exploring the Light event, and so they've got that one open right now. Their judge for that event is Glenn Randall. And they're taking, I believe their entries are being taken now through, I believe, right towards the end of March. So for those that want to look for another alternative option for submitting a call to entry type judged event, there is one going on up in Louisville right now as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Dale Ralph.
Hey, Michael, I've got one announcement real quick while you're on the announcements.
Right.
Been working with Matt Theobald on doing a workshop on April 17th in the evening. We're going to meet over by the Platte River Park. Cost is going to be $30 per person with a limit of 12 people. It's going to be two parts. One will be he's involved with a company that builds tripods. So we're going to do a little informal or informational thing on tripods, tripod heads, some of the things, that, probably get some tips and tricks on how to use them and why you'd buy certain heads over other things. And then the second one will be a sunset shoot, building on the skills he did in his filter workshop with scouting and composing with long exposure in mind, when and where filters can be used, field techniques, shooting with filters, etc. So I'm working on him to get the exact start time, and then I'll post that up to Meetup and to the website.
Okay, great. And let's see, for those that were, Matt was one of our presenters, what was it, about 2 or 3 months ago when he presented on
January 20, January.
Right. And that was his presentation was on long exposure photography with filters and so forth. And it was a great meeting. I learned quite a bit on that one. So that would be a great workshop. And you said that was April, what was the date?
17th.
April 17th? Okay.
17th, yeah.
Great.
In the evening.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, let's see here. So I'll go on here and introduce our presenter tonight. So Dale's fun and imaginative artwork had long been a creative outlet from a stifling-based profession. I believe it was a CPA, right? Accounting, where she spent her prior career. She uses digital composite techniques to freely express her imagination. Much of her initial inspiration began in 2014 after seeing some of the courses by Brooke Shaden. I believe those were probably the Creative Live courses on compositing that she has out there. And so, Dale took that and ran with it, and it's some pretty amazing things that she's created just following Brooke's lead on some of those things. Much of her work depicts strong, inspirational, and powerful women, imaginative themes, and childhood fantasies. One of her composite series, My Goddess, depicts strong and powerful female icons, emphasizing the relevance of male-female roles in society today. Another series, Wizard of Oz, includes a message of overcoming obstacles and revealing our hidden heart's desire by having the courage to take and complete the journey, something that I think all of us could experience from time to time. So it's just a great storyline throughout those images. Ongoing work often reflects current society issues, political themes, and that. And many of Dale's photographs have appeared in various juried exhibits and published in magazines. So I know I'm just kind of touching the surface there. Dale, I'll let you go ahead and take over. And if there's, I'm sure, plenty of things in your photography world that I missed, please go ahead and do that. And then following that, go ahead and we'll look forward to seeing tonight's presentation.
Well, I think, I just think photography should be fun. You got to shoot what you like to shoot, and you should have a good time with it, regardless of what anybody else thinks. So anyway, my biggest probably obstacle with this, I went through this with Bruce earlier, is making sure the Zoom stuff is in sync. So have you then shared the screen? Is that?
Yep. So go ahead and share your screen and then pull up your first thing. And then remember, we have to get out of share screen and go to when we switch programs.
That magic F3 I need.
Yep. F3 will give you a different desktop, and then you can find what you need.
Okay. And here we go. Here is the presentation, and we'll get going here. I said, I like having fun and doing this, and
It didn't.
I think this is kind of.
It didn't share yet. Yeah.
Oh, it didn't share.
Yeah. Try it again. You should just see that on your screen once you share.
I should see what I see my presentation.
Yeah, it didn't share for some reason. You should be able to share.
Okay, I'm going to share screen again. Now here it is.
There we go. Now
Yay, okay, great, thank you. Anyway, to me, this presentation is kind of the equivalent of when you were in grammar school and you were done with your summer vacation and you had to write that essay, what I did on my summer vacation. Well, I think this is what I did during the pandemic shutdown. And great, now it isn't moving.
give it a.
Okay.
There we go.
Here's the agenda. You
We
see
can
it?
see it now. It changed.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you good. It changed.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, the agenda for tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about idea generation, where you get your ideas for these crazy photographs, where to get costumes, the equipment you need, the setup, and a little bit about post-processing. Can you see, did it change again?
Yes, it did.
All right, I guess we're in business then. Anyway, idea generation. I get my ideas from several different sources, and I've listed some of them here. They aren't all of them. You may have other ideas, but something books and comics, fables, myths, life experience, art is healing, politics, movies, TV, children, dreams, philosophy, or just sometimes suggestions from friends and family that work out quite well. I'm going to go through each of these. I'm going to show some examples of the various types of photos that I have created from that have been ideas have been generated and photos created in each of these categories. The photos I'm going to show you, some of them will actually be self-portraits. Some will not be self-portraits, but could have been self-portraits, and a few others will be models. I just in this section, just trying to show you some of those photos once again created from the various themes. And by the way, the idea generation and creating photographs of this type to me is absolutely the most important part of it. It's more important than anything else, because the more you can visualize what it is you're trying to create, what it looks like, what the costuming is like, the better prepared you are with the purpose behind it, the better the photos tend to come out. So books and comics. As just mentioned, one of my books is probably The Wizard of Oz, because I think all of life's lessons are wrapped up in The Wizard of Oz. And this is actually the first series I ever did. I've had the witch costume for years before I even started doing this. It was my Halloween costume. My alter ego is the Wicked Witch of the West. And I found this great prop. See this broom? I found that great prop in a shop in Sarajevo when I was working in a job over there. Always on the lookout for props, and we'll talk about that a little later. But this is the moment in The Wizard of Oz when the Wicked Witch of the West has just found out that that little brat, that little girl, has got the ruby red slippers. Also from The Wizard of Oz, this is called Final Moments. This is the death of the East. This photo here I've created, I don't know, a little over a year ago, I think, and it's based on a book I read. The book is called Radium Girls, and it had one heck of an impact on me. This was about, true story, about these young women who got a job painting watch dials with radium paint way back when. And some of these girls were as young as 14 years old. And it was a very good job. It paid very well, and everybody wanted to work at this particular factory. But what they did, in order to make their paintbrush pointed so that they could do this fine work, they were encouraged to do what they called lip pointing, which would be to put the brush in their mouth and pull it out so that they could, the brush would be nice and sharp. Well, as time went on, and actually this is back at a time when this started, they actually thought radium was good for you. They even had radium drinks out, health drinks, radium. I thought it was good for you, and obviously it was not, because what radium does is it replaces the calcium in your bones with radium. If they dig up these people a year, 1,000 years later, they're still glowing. That's what bad it is. So a lot of these young women working in the factory, they had problems. Bones were disintegrating, teeth were disintegrating, jaws were breaking. And of course, there were no laws then to protect them. It's a rather upsetting story, and it kept haunting me. So after finishing the book, I think it was the next morning, I got up and immediately went downstairs to my computer and created this piece. This is also, you know who he is. He's obviously in a lot of books, including the Bible. This isn't a selfie. This is a friend of mine who posed for this. And this was done at Shutterfest at the museum in St. Louis. And she's sitting in the electric chair. In addition to books, you also have fables and myths. I find fables and myths are a very, very rich source of idea generation. As mentioned, before the lockdown, I had started a series of a goddess series where I was actually using models, because at my age, I'm not exactly goddess material. So I'm using a number of models to do this. But Fables and Myths, this one is actually me. This is part of my Nosferatu series. And Nosferatu was, some of you I'm sure have seen the film. It was a 1922 silent film. No, I didn't see it when it first came out. But anyway, the film is based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, but they had to change the name of it because they actually didn't have the rights to Bram Stoker's Dracula. But if you haven't seen the film, it's a hoot. I would recommend you see it. So this is the vampire myth, if you will, Nosferatu. This is my goddess series. This is Mary Pohl. She was one of the models at Shutterfest, and she's also a friend now. And she is the goddess, and her name Nyx, and she is NYX. She is the goddess of the night. This is another of the goddess series. This is Astrape, and Astrape is the goddess of lightning. And this is the goddess who she carries Zeus's lightning bolts for him. That was the inspiration for this piece. Another of the goddesses, this is a Hathor, and she is the Egyptian goddess of the sky. Boy, I tell you, there are 1,000,001 goddesses out there. It's a really fun series to do. Another place for inspiration of ideas, and I know a lot of people who do this particular type of work, life experience or art is healing. And there's like, when I've gone to a couple of Brooke Shaden's, in addition to watching her online stuff, I've gone to a couple of her conferences, Promoting Passion as her conferences. And there's a lot of people who come to that conference who really do this type of work. There was one young man, big fella, and he told his life story at one of the conferences, and his life story was pretty devastating. Very, very bad experience with his mother. And, this is somebody who probably should have been damaged for life, but he's very resilient. And he ended up doing a series of very raw photographs based on his own life experience and as a way of healing himself. Another person I know, a friend of mine, she ended up where 2 years in a row she experienced miscarriages, and she ended up doing some very raw photographs once again based on her experience. But it's really a way. Some people journal to work out issues, some people create photographs. This is one of mine. This is called Prisoner of Thought, and what's behind this is have you ever been in a situation where you're thinking something, you had some negative thought about yourself or something happened and you cannot get it out of your mind? You just keep reliving it and reliving it and reliving it and suffering as a result of this. So this is my piece based on that. It's thought. This is another earlier piece that I did. It's called Judgment. And this piece is what self-recrimination feels like. First time when I presented this, it actually generated a lot of conversation. Another place you can get ideas for various photographs is politics. I'm going to show a couple photos here. I don't care what your political bend is. I'm not showing these photos to get in any political arguments, just to give you a few examples of some of the stuff that I created, because I will tell you this last election season or whatever, there was a lot of opportunity for political pieces. This is a piece, this was my yard sign for the election, and you can tell what side of the fence I'm on. And did this, it's a friend of mine, John. He basically, whenever I need a male model, he's been very, very cooperative, and he's helped me out. He's helped me out on several photographs. He only lives a few blocks from me, which helps. This was a photo that I did for a sign for the Women's March a couple years ago. And it was based on the Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation hearing. I spent, I actually probably watched about 80% of it. And obviously you can tell from this, I wasn't positively impressed. So I created this piece. Once again, this is my friend John's hand. And I originally created, and we didn't have the backdrop of the beer in there. And then another friend of mine said, well, he likes beer. So I ended up, this is a stock photo of beer in the background. Another place for inspiration would be movies and television. Once again, movies, this is another from my Nosferatu series that I've done during the lockdown. And this was shot in an archway in the building right next door to where I live. It's based on, once again, the 1922 silent film Nosferatu. This is based on the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. And this is Ellie Golightly for Alien. And this actually started, I'm not sure exactly how it started. It started with a Facebook conversation on another photo I had posted. And a friend of mine mentioned something about a cigarette holder. And I ended up going down to Amazon, found the cigarette holder. It's less than $5. I bought it, had most of the other costuming elements. And this was formed in my head. And this then became the reality of Ollie Golightly. And these alien ones are all part of my series called Aliens Are People Too. This is the alien version of Morticia Addams, which is a TV show as well as movies that were done with her. This one's obviously a composite. Another great place, I think, where you can use this kind of photo and look for inspiration is children. I unfortunately don't have any little kids in my life at the moment, but for those of you who've either got your own children that are little, or you've got nieces and nephews or grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, there's so much opportunity here. I really wish I had a little kid in my life right now, because what you can do is you can find out what the kid likes, and then you can actually create a series on it or even a book. Like, for example, when my nephew Mitchell, he was 3, 4, and 5, he was absolutely in love with Thomas the Tank Engine. If you've ever watched Thomas, kind of boring, but he loved it, as did many, many children his age. And one day I made the mistake of asking him what he wanted to be when he grew up. And he told me he wanted to be a train. So I said to him, "Oh, you mean you want to be the engineer who drives the train?" And he got very indignant and said, "No, I want to be a train." So if he was little now, he's in college now, so it's a little late, but if he was that age now, I think I would be going out and taking pictures of trains, superimposing his face on the front of one of the trains to do a Thomas-like character and writing a story around it. Because one, I think it'd be a great thing for the kid, a great present for the kid, but it'd also be a great gift for everybody who loves that child, the parents, the grandchildren, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, and everybody. I just think it'd be a fun thing to do. So I now have to wait for my nieces and nephews to have children of their own before I can do this. The only picture I ever did with a kid, this is the grandson of a friend of mine. And he was 2 when I did this, and just a picture of him. Kind of did it as a thank you. He's also the person that I hired to renovate my kitchen, and he did some favors in that when he did do that. So I created this picture for them. Another thing you might be interested in is a picture that denotes a philosophy or a message, something that is important to you. I'm always fascinated by themes of darkness and light. So I've created a few pieces around that. This one you may have seen before, because I know I've presented to this club before. This is the very first self-portrait I ever did. It's the 3rd shooting of it, but it's the very first one I ever did. And I did it for a class that I took at Mile High Church. And the class, what you had to do at the end of the class is they wanted you to do a project. And this one is called Looking for the Light. So the message behind this is you've got this woman who is blindfolded, and she's looking outside herself for somebody to look to, somebody who has the answers, somebody who has the light, and doesn't realize she's totally blind to the fact that she's actually carrying the light, as we all do, and sometimes look beyond ourselves or to somebody else for the answers. Kind of in a similar vein, this is called, what is it? State of Mind. And this is obviously the way you think about things really determines your own reality. You can be having, I mean, the conditions around you can be absolutely chaotic. They can be dark. There can be a pandemic going on. Who knows? But it's the way you look at things and how you envision them that really determines the way you think about it. This was an earlier title before I ever published it anywhere. But anyway, the current title is State of Mind. This is a picture that I did for, I deliberately created for the Holy Moly exhibit that is held, that Nitsa Knoll Galleries holds, I think it's every other year. And at the time I created this, it came into my head, this is one of the photos, I get some of my best ideas, either when I'm going to sleep or right when I wake up. And this is one when I was going to sleep because there was more talk about the Catholic priest scandal and the molestation of children. And I somehow got this idea in my head because I could see this child in the shadow of the cross looking up at her abuser. And this one is called The Price of Silence, because that is the price, the children. If you're not going to do something about it, it's the price of silence. So I created it and entered it into that particular exhibit, and I was very fortunate that it did indeed get in. This was a picture I created for a friend of mine who was writing a book. And it's called Follow Your Dreams, because she's writing a book and it was about kind of like what you think is your reality and follow your dreams and go for it. So I created it. She actually didn't like it. She wanted just a plain picture of her on a sidewalk. So I gave her a picture of her on a sidewalk. But this particular picture is actually sold. It's one of my favorites. Another of my Wizard of Oz series, but this one also has a message to it. It is called Obstacle, and the subtext is what's blocking your yellow brick road. And this was a recent creation. This also, again, is not me, although it could have been a selfie. It's a friend of mine. We took it up in a cemetery up in Idaho Springs, and just kind of took it for fun. It's going to be more of a horror thing, but then with all of the pandemic stuff, I ended up adding the coronavirus in. And this is called The Grim Reaper. Okay, so you've gotten your ideas. Once again, you've generated your ideas, you've thought about it, you know what it wants, you know what you want that picture to look like. You know what you want it to say. You got a feel for how you want your character costumed and what they're going to look at. Once you do that, then you get into this, where do you find your costumes and props? First place to look is your closet. Because there may be, depending on how complicated it is, some pictures I've done is something as simple as I've done several kind of ghost pictures, and I've actually just used a long white nightgown that I have. It's right in the closet. And you can also repurpose existing clothes and or objects. A length of fabric can be a costume. For example, this is the initial photo out of the camera for Astrape I did, but the dress that she's wearing is a length of fabric. It was actually put on her and done by a friend of mine, Ted Sanderlands, who ended up draping her in that fabric with the necklace and putting that together. So fairly simple, just a length of fabric. Another thing you can do is you can make your own. There are many, if you've ever been in a fabric store, there are the fabric books and there's the pattern books usually in the back. And there's usually a section in those pattern books for usually Halloween costumes. Also, if you go online, sometimes you can find patterns for very elaborate type of costumes and dresses and stuff that wouldn't be in your standard pattern books. But if you're good with a sewing machine, you can make your own. You can also rent from costume shops. The advantage of renting from costume shops is obviously they have one heck of a variety, and they usually have the things that are currently in fashion. Like, for example, a lot of people like to do cosplay and they like to do the superheroes, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, and all of those. They usually have those sorts of things in the costume shop. And you can get right on with doing your picture without having to go to a lot of trouble, just go rent a costume. The disadvantage, obviously, it is going to cost you. You can also borrow. If you know people who have certain things, like, you know, so-and-so's got a certain jacket that you could use on, you might want to borrow it. My favorite borrowing story, my second Shutterfest that I went to, I think I've been to 5 of them now, but the second one I went to, a friend of mine went with me, and we decided we wanted to do a film noir shoot. But to do a film noir shoot, what I needed to have was some dresses from, say, the 30s and the 40s. And if you go to vintage clothing stores in the Denver area, I couldn't find anything like that. Or if you did find it, it was ridiculously expensive. I'm sad to say what they're saying is vintage now is the 70s and the 80s. And let's face it, the 70s were pretty damn bad fashion-wise. But anyway, there is an app called Nextdoor. And Nextdoor basically is kind of a neighborhood, brings neighbors together and has all kinds of postings on there. So for the heck of it, I put out an advertisement saying I was looking for dresses from the 30s and the 40s for a film noir shoot. And I was willing to buy them if they were reasonably priced or borrow them. Some woman responded to that ad, and I'm still blown away by this. She lives in my neighborhood, and she basically said she had dresses that belonged to her. I think it was her great aunt. And she said I could borrow them for nothing. So I went over there. She didn't know me from Adam. I'm still blown away by this. And she lent me these beautiful dresses, which we took to Shutterfest, and was unfortunately wasn't able to do it because we had a mix up with the model. But anyway, I'm still blown away that she would be willing to lend me that. And then kind of a last resort, you can also purchase it. And things to purchase, you could purchase clothing, masks. I personally, when I use the masks, I prefer the latex masks because they're the most realistic, or props. As I pointed out earlier, I got that one prop that I bought in Sarajevo, that crazy broom, which was perfect for the witch's broom. And there's other props I have gotten. I get most of my stuff off of Amazon, although I have purchased from other places. And you can also you can go down to Goodwill or secondhand shops and get your clothing. If you're looking for like wedding dresses or ball gowns or things like that, this right now is the time to get them. The Goodwill shops usually have these kinds of things, very often in the window. The one down on Broadway has them in the window, and they're a great place to get them. If you go on a Saturday, they have stuff half price. And sometimes with Goodwill, I know I did a scarecrow picture for the Wizard of Oz series, and I needed a pair of, like, my model was a tall, skinny guy, obviously, and I needed a pair of jeans, and I needed a shirt, kind of a, like a flannel shirt, and went down to the Goodwill and picked up those things. The shirt I ended up tearing up a little bit so I could put straw in it, but the jeans I didn't tear up. So I went in and got it on a Saturday, and actually then when I was done with it, because I didn't have further use for it, I returned it to Goodwill. So a little bit I paid for it would be my donation to Goodwill. A garage and estate sales are also a great place to find things. I'm on some list where I get a notification of estate sales, and I've been to a couple of them. I've bought a couple of, like I can't remember there. It's very, very designer brands, high-end designer brands. I've gotten 2 dresses from that. One I got from a garage sale in my neighborhood. Another one I got from a estate sale in upstate New York when I went with my sister. And retail is obviously, you can get it that way. And most of my things I buy on Amazon, and what I check the reviews. And like my masks, if I go and buy a mask, I will, I look for latex masks. I look to see that they're realistic. I try to make sure that they have at least 100 reviews. And I try to make sure that there's at least 4.5 stars. And then when I decide when I'm looking at it further, I then look at the reviews that are the lowest rated reviews and see what they have to say. Because sometimes what they say are not things that I care about. Like, for example, with the masks, sometimes when people who rate it 1 star will say it's too big. Well, I don't care if it's too big. You can stuff something up in it. And some are meant to be too big. My alien head is going to be too big. It's got this dome on it. It's going to be too big for anyone. And the other one I get is it's too small. Well, I have a pinhead, so that doesn't bother me either. And the third one you'll get is it's too hot. Well, I'm not wearing it to a party where I'm going to have it on for several hours, so I don't care if it's too hot. And latex masks are going to be hot. And the other thing I look at when I'm looking to buy something is, will you use it more than once? If I think there's a possibility of using it more than once, I likely may buy it. Oh, one more thing on the reviews. The one thing that will stop me from buying a mask is when somebody says in the reviews, it doesn't look like the picture. And if you're on Amazon, very often when people say that in a review, they actually post pictures. And so you can see that. And I know there was one mask I was interested in. It was the, what's his name? Boris Karloff's Frankenstein. And the picture advertising on Amazon was wonderful. But several people said it didn't look like the picture, and they posted pictures of what they got, and it didn't look like the picture. So I was not interested in it. So will you use it more than once? And also you can buy, they have a lot of clothing. I've got, I think it's about 3 dresses now that look like they're from the 1950s, which I got off of Amazon. And once again, people will post the reviews. They'll talk about how it fits. And they sometimes post pictures of them wearing the particular thing. So you can kind of see how it looks on certain body types. The other thing I do when I buy costumes, since I'm and creating these characters, I'm the character in their self-portraits, I buy these things in my own size. Even when I buy them and I may use them for models, I try to buy them in a size that I can wear. Because for me, buying something in a size 2 is going to really, really limit the ability for me to use it, except with very special models and very rarely. These are some of the latex masks I have. I have many more than this. This is the devil mask. This is Nosferatu mask. And this one is kind of a hag. It looks like the Marty Feldman type thing. The masks also, when I buy them, the latex I try to get, the masks tend to range, if I buy them, from anywhere from say $25 to $45, which seems kind of expensive. But if you get a good one, it's worth it, because I store these things in kind of plastic bin and I can pull them out and they retain their shape. They're really good. I bought a second alien mask. My one alien mask that I've used mostly is a very good mask, but I bought a second one that was $13. And it's much thinner, and it came in a box, and it was kind of creased, if you will, and probably have to take a hairdryer to it or something. I think it's usable. It's just nowhere near as good as the other one. So you kind of, as they say, get what you pay for. Does anybody have any, I should have asked this before, does anybody have any questions on anything I've covered so far?
I don't see anything in the chat, so.
Oh, okay, fine, then I'll just let it go. Equipment. These are actually very, very easy to set up. You can do this with nothing more than a camera with a timer. You can do this with nothing more than a cell phone with a timer. Obviously, you want something that allows you to keep your camera steady when you're doing it. So a tripod is obviously useful. You could also use a platypod, I guess. Or if you had a shelf or something, you could just put something on to steady it so that it would be held still, that you could use that. Other things that will make it easier are the use of a remote shutter release, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And another thing that you can add on that makes it even more, improves the quality of the photography, I think, and makes it even easier, would also to be able to use a flash with a remote shutter release. But if we talk about just using a camera with a camera timer, obviously the advantages to that is there's no additional cost. Disadvantage, and this can get pretty hairy depending on the complexity of your costuming and the pose you're trying to strike and what you're trying to do. If you're trying to wear a mask with a headpiece on top of the mask, this gets pretty tricky. But anyway, you have very limited time to strike the pose and get the costume and the props ready. And it can be awkward depending on the complexity of the photo. And also, when you're doing these things totally by yourself, sometimes you think it's going to look one way, then you go look at the back of the camera and no, it isn't. Your body wasn't in the right position or something. Anyway, just to give you an example, I was trying to shoot this mother and child, this Madonna and child picture, and I had a remote shutter release, and it worked the first time I clicked it, and then it stopped working. I didn't know what was wrong with it. I quickly checked, couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with it. The batteries were okay. But I didn't want to, basically, I'd already put the costume on, had that stuff, didn't want to give up the shoot while I went and researched it. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going over to the camera. I had the camera on a remote timer, and I think I had it for 5 seconds or whatever it was. Then I had to run back over to the stool I'm sitting on, sit down. I wanted the shawl to be over my head. I obviously didn't make it, and wanted the baby in a position where, you know, there was a connection. Obviously didn't get that either. This was another attempt of trying to do the same thing. Didn't get it, didn't work. Finally, I got this, which is about the closest I came, where I at least had the shawl over the head, and then had the baby and mother looking at each other. And then finally, this was the final piece that was created from that. This is also part of, obviously, my aliens are people too, Madonna and child. If you want to make your life easier in doing this, I suggest the purchase of a remote transmitter. The advantage is it's easy to use, it's inexpensive, most are from $10 to $40. It enables sufficient time to get into the correct pose and adjust the costume, because all you'd have to do, you get ready, you just click this thing, and all you have to do is hide the timer These are actually pretty old. These are the first ones that I bought back when I was shooting the Wizard of Oz series out of doors, and then I was using natural light. But these are just examples of some of them. I also know that I saw something on Amazon that was, I think they had for $10, they had 4 remote shutter releases that work with cell phones. The only problem is with that is you've got to be your range is not very far. You have to be close in, but these work pretty well. To make things even easier, remote shutter release and flash. Obviously, advantage of this, it enables addition of light where it's needed as opposed to shutter release without flash that only uses ambient light. Taking self-portraits if you're out of doors, like a lot of the Wizard of Oz ones I did, is pretty easy. If you've got the outdoor light, you can do that. When you're taking them indoors, as I had to do when I was, especially with the pandemic, the series that I've been doing, the Nosferatu, the Aliens Are People Too, and my Hags, I had to basically do those indoors and I needed additional light. It also enables you to add effects such as gels to enhance your photo. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of David Bird. Excuse me. David Bird has a YouTube channel called Reality Reimagined, and he does a lot of photos with, he's not doing selfies, but he does do a lot of photos with flash and gels, which is interesting. And using the remote shutter release, once again, enables you sufficient time to get your costumes and props arranged as you want them. The disadvantages, you need to ensure, and I learned this the hard way, you need to ensure that the camera, the shutter release, and the flash all work together. Because I found several things where it will trick the shutter or it'll trip the shutter but won't trip the flash, or it will trip the flash and won't trip the shutter. And I called up a couple camera stores, like some of the big ones in New York, and quite frankly, they weren't very helpful. And had to kind of figure out what to do. And not every shutter release with every flash or camera, and not even every shutter release works with their own transmitter. Sometimes you have to make sure you've got the right one, because you need to trigger at the same time. And obviously, if you're doing that, there is an additional cost for the flash or the speed lights. This is just what the setup looks like. Obviously, you have your speed light here, and you have your transmitter on top of the camera that's here. This is pretty much the setup I have, would be this. This is the type of speed lights that you can get now. We had a lot of tech talk before the thing, before we began the presentation, and you can buy the name brand. If you got Canon, you can buy a Canon, you can buy a Nikon, you can buy a Sony, but they're going to cost you a lot more money. I went with the Young transmitter, the Young New transmitter, and the Young New flash that went with it. That's what I got. This is considerably less expensive. It actually had pretty good reviews, although there is a friend of mine who takes pictures. He doesn't like the Young New because he thinks they fail. But for what I do, I'm not out shooting weddings and events where I'm flashing all the time. I am just shooting, I'm setting up certain pictures, and I'm shooting that particular picture when I'm doing it. So whether this thing would wear out after time, I think depends on how many, how often you're actually using it. And so that's up to you, but these are considerably less expensive. And this is just the other side of the transmitter that goes on the top of the camera. And those of you familiar with flash, I kind of learned this. Brian Lopez helped me a lot with this, but the, you can set up different flashes on different, I don't know what you call these things, but anyway, you can just set up different flashes with different power levels and all of that, and do that. I'm just using, at the moment, I'm just using a single flash. In shooting your pictures, the easiest way to do this and get everything right is to shoot it in place with the desired setting, props, lighting, etc., because it really simplifies post-processing. And some people do this very elaborately. I try to set up as much as I can. I do some as composites, but I do shoot a lot of them, especially the stuff I've done during the pandemic, is I'm pretty much shooting stuff that's in place. Those of you who might be familiar with Brooke Shaden's work, one of the first things I watched, it was a Creative Live presentation, that she shot. She did a thing on the Princess and the Pea. And it's nice if you have a budget, which I'm sure with Creative Life, she probably had a budget. Because what she did is she went to the setting, this old decaying room with peeling paint and all of that. And she literally had people bring in a whole bunch of mattresses. She sat the model on top of the mattresses with handfuls of peas and let the peas spill out of her hands as she took the picture. That obviously I don't have a budget for that. If I were to have done something like the Princess of the Pea, I would have had to use Photoshop to duplicate mattresses and do the rest of it. But for what you can to put together, this is actually very helpful. If you're shooting for composite, I suggest, this is just common sense too, you shoot against a plain contrasting background to facilitate selection. And also pay attention to the color and direction of the light to match to the background the figure would be placed in. So if you know where, if you have the setting or photograph of where you're going to place this particular figure, and you know where the light's coming from and how it's working, you can set it up that way. And obviously, if you're going to be shooting for composites, you have to watch your shadows. Have you ever seen people that put out pictures and the person is kind of floating because they don't have a shadow and they're not grounded? And when shooting by yourself and wearing a latex mask, it is often, and I do mean usually, difficult to see through the mask. The alien mask only has little bitty eye holes below and something above, and it's hard to see. And it's very difficult sometimes to get in the proper pose and costume. And if you're putting something on top of your head and you can't see through the mask, you've also got to be careful you don't trip over things. Because I shot Whistler's Alien Mother, which I'll show you in a few minutes. When I shot that, I had to move my furniture in my living room out of the way and went into my bathroom downstairs to put on the alien mask and drape the lace thing over my head that I needed to do. Then I had to walk about 12 to 14 feet to get against the wall I needed to be. And I had to be careful I wasn't tripping over the furniture I had there, or worse, tripping over my cat. And once again, so you have to be aware of those obstacles. This is just to give you an idea of the setup. I mean, obviously the camera would be higher and it would be against the wall. I wouldn't have the pictures there, but this is just to show you I had the camera set up, and then this is where I had the speed light was in here. And shoot that, and that's with the remote shutter release over here that I'm shooting the picture, releasing a shutter, and then taking this and getting rid of it. If I'm shooting in place and there's actually costume props and things around me, I'm going to have to hide that so it isn't in the picture. If I'm shooting for composite, you kind of just can put it on the floor, and because it won't be in the picture anyway when you're done. This is a picture. This is after I had shot a picture, like in the setup that I just showed you. And I merely placed, because it's for a composite, I merely placed the remote shutter release on the ground. And this is the picture. This is the setting I put it in, Darlaman Palace in Kabul, Afghanistan. This is an earlier one I shot. These were before I was using the speed lights. These were actually constant lights I had. I shot this in my old condo I had. So this is it's probably about 4 years old. This is a school marm. If you're shooting for composites, I recommend you do not shoot against a green screen. That green it kind of reflects on things and it's hard to get out. Or at least for those of you who don't think it's hard to get out, it's an extra step you really don't need. So I end up these days, I shoot against a white or black cloth. The cloth I have is kind of wrinkled. I don't care because I'm cutting the figure out. I'm not shooting a portrait. And this is the setting I put her in. This setting is from Belmar Village. Belmar has a historic village out there. They're very, very nice. I went out there and they let me take a bunch of pictures, and this was an old time schoolroom. And so I put my school marm in the schoolroom. This was shot once again at my old condo, and on the balcony of that is actually in the pool deck on that building. And this was just pretty much shot it in place and then did a bunch of editing to come up with this picture, State of Mind. And this is the first one I told you about. This is the first selfie I ever did. This was done in the basement of my old condo building. I actually liked the wall. I wanted it to look like that. So pretty much shot that one in place and then had to get rid of the ductwork and stuff and obviously do a lot of editing on the picture. This was shot recently. This is part of my Nosferatu series. This was shot during the pandemic. This is shot in my loft upstairs. And once again, put a little furniture out of the way, put this table here, put props on the table, and shot that. That's kind of a classic pose from the movie. And then I edited and used Silver FX Pro on it to give it that grainy look of a 1922 film. Well, this is I was trying to shoot this. I was trying to shoot a meditating alien. So what I did, this is also in the loft. I went upstairs, I moved the furniture out of the way. I brought in the Buddha, I brought in the singing bowl, got everything ready, turned my back, and these guys have taken over. So I had to shoot the cats out, watch those obstacles. This is one like where I didn't get rid of the remote shutter release more quickly. I suspect the cat was in the way and I had to shoo him out of the way. So you can see I'm in the process of putting it down when the shutter went off. Another obstacle here. I was trying to shoot a 1950s, kind of a 1950s vibe with an alien and showing her dusting with a feather duster. I didn't even realize the cat was there until I took the mask off. So, and this was the final one I did, obviously reshot it. Don't ever wave anything made out of feathers in front of a cat. It just doesn't work. So I did this one. I finished this in Color FX Pro to give it kind of a, an old-timey colorization to it. Post-processing. In post-processing, I use mostly, my go-to program is Photoshop. I know a lot of people who shoot either events or weddings or things like that, or a lot of it, or even landscape, a lot of landscape photographers, macro photographers. Most other people, they tend to go for most of their work to Lightroom, but I go to Photoshop. And by the way, for me, and I know I'm probably weird in this, I love post-processing. Most people don't like it, but I think if you're shot an event, like you shot a wedding and I've got to work my way through 1,000 photographs, I probably wouldn't like it either. But the fact that I'm creating one photo at a time, I actually really enjoy the process of playing with Photoshop and Lightroom and a lot of other things also. I know some people talk about Photoshop that they wish it was easier. And the only way you can really learn Photoshop is to use it. And I know, quite frankly, very little about Photoshop, but I know what I need to know. And every now and then when I want to try something new, there are so many free resources out there. It is just amazing that show you little things. You can look it up, but how do I do this? And there are programs out there. There's training out there. It's amazing. The people I really like are Aaron Nace of Flern. If you're a beginner in Photoshop, he's very good. And he did about a year ago, he did something like 30 days to Photoshop. He also did a Lightroom one in addition. I don't think it was quite 30 days. He did a lesser one in Lightroom, was helpful. But if you use it, you learn it. And so I kind of learned like maybe 1 or 2 new techniques with every picture I do, look it up, and then I kind of know how to do it. I also like, as you've seen, I like the Nick collection, especially if I'm trying to do something that is old-timey black and white. The Nick collection is great. So that was used pretty much exclusively for my Nosferatu series. Luminar I've used, that has some good things in it. It's great for sky replacement. It's good for other things too, but I haven't used it enough where I am fluent in that. Topaz has been a godsend, actually. The pictures I have got, I mean, I've taken pictures for years, and especially when I do a composite, sometimes the setting I want to put somebody in, I took a long time ago. So the size of that particular picture, and quite frankly, the sharpness of it, but that's mostly me, is not particularly what I would like. I showed you the picture a while back of the, where did that thing go? Hang on. Well, this one, I think. Yeah, this one here. The background picture is Darliman Palace in Afghanistan. I took that several years ago when I was over there on an assignment, and I took it with a Nikon D90. And so obviously when I look at and I took her with a Nikon D800. So obviously there's a lot more pixels involved in the more recent photograph than there was in the background. So when I went to Topaz, gigapixel AI is terrific for enlarging things, sharpen, and there's so many of these things, denoise and all of this that you can use on their newer AI programs that are a godsend when you're combining things. A new one that has come out probably, I don't know, last 6 months or so is Boris Fx. And Boris Fx has got lots of special effects in it. They do a lot of things with lens flare, and so when you're looking for something that you want to put in there that's a little bit different, Boris Fx is really kind of neat. I've used it, just started using it, but I've used it in a few pictures and I do like it. There's another one that I know was recommended by David Bird of Reality Reimagined called Generic. And that kind of uses it's like puts lighting effects in things, which is very interesting. And then there are obviously a lot of other ones. Something I'm going to go through in just a minute. I mean, my nose itches. Anyway, when I create these things, there's a couple things that you need to do to make the characters that you create when you're using masks a little bit more realistic. And one is to create realistic eyes when using a mask, and the other one is to change the skin color so that the skin color matches the character, the mask and the character you're trying to create. So I am briefly, let's see if this works. I'm going to try to get over to Photoshop. Guess I need to be here.
I think you need to stop sharing your screen and then open Photoshop and then reshare your screen. I think that's what we did the other day.
Stop sharing, is it here?
Yeah.
New,
Yeah, up above it should be stop sharing, yeah, and then stop sharing your screen and then open Photoshop and then reshare your screen.
okay.
There we go.
So I do that. I'm opening Photoshop now. Here it is. I go back here and see if this works. Oh, here it is. It's here.
Well, it's not shown on our screens.
Oh, it isn't showing your screen.
Yeah, double check your screen share. Oh, there we go. Okay, now you're in Photoshop.
I
Good.
just double click on it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, to do this, like here's that picture I showed you before, just me and the 3 masks that I've got. So you have a picture saying with this in my Nosferatu character. So what I want to do is I want to replace these eyes because they obviously look very, very obviously a mask, and I want to change the skin color. So what I decided to do is I've actually got, you can get eyes from anything. You can take pictures of somebody's eyes and you can use that. But I thought for this, it'd be fun to let's use my cat's eyes. So I went here and I cut out the cat's eyes. And this is the right eye right here. And what I did is I just cut out the eye, and then I went and resized it using I would have used free transform. It's not here right now because I'm not doing it, but I would have used edit free transform, brought the eye down to the size, put it in the right angle that it needed to be, and place it in the socket right here. And let's see, then I would have, what I did then is if I wanted to change the color of the eye, I could do that. And I used the color balance, just put a color balance layer on that related back to the layer that was the eye. And then I actually blended the eye in a little bit by taking a soft brush from over here and taking colors, using the colors from the mask and kind of just adjusting around the edge of the eye. Then I just took that same eye and I free transformed it. I flipped it horizontally. I free transformed it. to put it over here. Once again, used a color balance layer to change the color of the eye. And then I blended that eye in. In order to get the skin color done, what I did is I did a selection, whatever selection tool you like to use. I tend to use the pen tool because it's easier when you're actually trying to select something from the middle of a photograph. It's a little trickier. Adobe's come a long way. Adobe Photoshop's come a long way to select subject when you're actually doing the whole subject. That maybe you only have to refine a few edges around there or something. But when you're doing parts of it like hands or necks or something. So what I did is I did a selection. I used the pen tool, but you could use any of the tools that work for you, and made a selection of the neck. And then I put that selection is on a separate layer. And then I used edit fill, and I filled with the color, and I took the color from the mask. And here's what it looked like when I just filled it. I guess I need to hang on here. Oh, that's why. And when you first do it and you select the color from the mask and you put it in, it looks like that, which doesn't look good, obviously. But then you change your blend mode. Change your blend mode from normal to color. And it lets the details come through. So that's a couple things that I do to make my mask-like characters look a little bit more realistic. Okay, now I'm going to try this thing again. So to get back to where I was, stop share. Share screen. And first I want. Oh, here it is. Can you see that?
Yeah, we're back up.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're back, you're back.
So those are two things I do to try to make those characters a little bit more realistic. And just a couple things, if you're actually shooting for composites, just kind of a rehash here, is make sure that you're shooting it in a way that you have the ability to make the selection. Obviously, if you are doing it against a very busy background, it's going to be harder to select. And you can use that Adobe Select Subject and just refine some of the edges where they are needed. Once again, look at your light source and direction and make sure that that is congruent with the background you're going to put them in. And also look at the color of light. You're not going to shoot something you shot in bright sunlight and then put it in something that is a sunset picture. And mind your shadows. Is this going to work here? And then just to take you through just a few of the ones that I've shot within like the last year. This is one of my Hag series. This was shot at a friend's house actually up in Idaho Springs. And costuming was simply I got this raggy sweatshirt, which looks like heck, but it's kind of like a polar fleece, and it's so damn warm I don't get rid of it. But I turned it inside out, which was the perfect costume. And this is one of my favorite prop finds. And this is I love this Scythe, and I got it on Amazon. It's made out of like a very hard rubbery thing. It's terrific. I love this thing. And then just to go through a few more. This is another one of the Hag. This was shot upstairs in once again in my loft. And this is where I used Boris Fx to get the light effects on here. You did that with Boris Fx. This was called Too Early, another one of my Aliens Are People 2 series. This was shot at my kitchen table. This is not a selfie, but it could have been. We did some of you went to it, we did a shoot with models. We just hired a few models and did a shoot in City Park, mask shoot a while ago. And this is one of the models, this is Wick, and this one's called Well Informed. This was actually the first one I ever shot because I think the initial idea, because I shot some things with just the alien mask, and Wick is the one who suggested a shower picture, actually, somebody coming out of the shower, which then led me to the idea of Aliens Are People too. And I've been having a great time doing this series. This is my latest one, did this one last weekend. This is called Bathing Beauty. The costume is actually my grandmother's. bathing suit. It's made out of wool. It must be 100 years old. I actually looked up old pictures on the internet, and made in the 1920s. So bathing beauty. This is a picture I told you about. This is Whistler's alien mother, shot in my living room with the furniture pulled back. This is the shower. This is coming out of the shower, which was once again based on Wick's idea. So another one of my aliens are people too. This is one of the problems when we talk about the mask. I should have stuffed the top of the mask with something because it kind of squashed out like this. If I can do this. And she looks like she's got some giant pimple. And that's it, the end. Light source can come from anywhere. Any questions?
This is great. I don't see anything in the chat, but I was just curious, how long from the start to finish, like when you come up with your idea, how long does it usually take you to put them together? I know they're probably all varied, but on it as an average.
Well, these days it's much easier. It's when I started doing this, the first ones I did, it might have taken me 20 or 30 hours to do something, which sounds ridiculous now. I do them mostly between, say, 3 and 4 hours usually.
Cool.
Might
And
be a
then
little
that-
different,
you-
take a little.
And you go to what I think it was St. Louis is the Shutterfest. Is that where you go?
Yeah, I've been going to Shutterfest for 5 years. 2020 was really a tragedy for me because I had 3 separate photo conferences, most I've ever had scheduled in 1 year. Shutterfest, and there was another one called ClickCon I was going to go to, and then there was one that was Brooke Shaden was just about to schedule her Promoting Passion conference when COVID hit, so it never got canceled, never got done, and I was very disappointed because I wanted to continue my goddess series. So
Yeah.
suddenly I was shut down and couldn't shoot any goddesses. So I started shooting characters, more and more characters. But Shutterfest is great if you haven't been because you have access to all kinds of models. And these days I don't really go for the classes. I go for the availability of the models. And I now know several models and they're absolutely wonderful. And you just set up shoots on your own, go in like a day early, set up shoots on your own. And it's great.
Where you go. Okay, great.
And Dale, I have a couple of questions here, but real quick, that Shutterfest, you said, what time of year is that typically? Are they going to have that in 2021?
Poor Sal Sincata who runs it. This guy, I feel so sorry for him. He's a great guy, and I love the way he's handled it. It was so honest and straightforward, and he did what he could, and he took care of people. Anyway, it's usually the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that after Easter every single year. It's in St. Louis. However, obviously last year he postponed it.
Right.
And then COVID continued and he postponed it again. So he's postponed it now, but there were like 2 choices. He's postponed it. He's going to hold it this year in September. I can't go to September, unfortunately. I have a previous commitment during the time, but he's also holding it again in 2022 at Easter time, the usual time.
Okay, so roughly a year from now, a little bit longer than that,
Yeah.
will be definitely on the agenda. Great.
You should go. It's a lot of fun, and you're going to see some of you. I'll be there. Brian Lopez usually goes with me, goes with me, and we set up certain private shoots also. My friend Jen Sulak, who's on this call, she sometimes goes, or she sometimes goes to some of the shoots around it or sets some things up. But it's a great deal of fun.
No, I'll bet it's a blast just in that environment. And that another question I had, so for some of the other objects that, most of those are all things that you've taken photos of, very in your props and so forth. Are there ever times that you go to like the stock agencies or something like that for some of those? Like you had like planets and some of those kind of things and some of those. Is that coming off of like Shutterstock or something like that, or is that?
Yes, I do use stock images, but depending on what you're going to use them for, I try to use them for only minor parts of photographs. The one I had, the very first photo I showed from The Wizard of Oz with the winged monkeys, that's quite a composite. That is the east gate of City Park. The basic background was these are that I shot. The basic background was the Great Sand Dunes. The monkeys were actually shot at the zoo, but the wings from the monkeys were stock photos. I bought a couple, I think it was probably from iStock, which is usually when I buy them, it's iStock, although there's several. There's Unsplash, which has some free stuff on there. I start there, but they don't have the variety. But the bats were great. I just take the wings off the bats and put them on the monkeys. And I've also, in the past, I've shot other vampire type photos where I've had, I know I've shot Jane Love. She's one of the models. Great person, great model. And I put bat wings on her for the vampire shoots that I've done in the past. And obviously the one I did for the political one about the Kavanaugh trial, the background of that was in fact a stock photo.
Okay.
But I use them, but if you're going to enter them in competition stuff, you have to watch the rules because sometimes they don't want any stock type stuff. So you have to be very careful with it.
Right. No, thank you. Let's see here. Yeah, and I just kind of jotted down some notes, but it was really interesting, you know, when you look at, like you said, the attention that you pay to the direction of light whenever you're doing your, say, self-portraits. Now you're doing that, like when you're doing that, you already have a scene that you plan on putting that in, right? Because sometimes you're taking that and putting it in, say, like an outdoor scene where maybe the light and shadows or whatever is naturally out there. You're trying to portray and make sure that you're getting that same direction with your, say, speed lights and modifiers and so forth. And is that, I guess the question is that's all going through your mind when you're taking that self-portrait shot, is the direction and where that image is going to end up being in the final product, right?
If I know, and I don't always do it because sometimes I don't know, quite frankly. Right. But if I know where I want to put it, absolutely. And if I don't, and I'm looking for a setting to put it in, like the picture I had of the hag at Darliman Palace in Afghanistan, I didn't really know where he was going to put her. And I went, look, I knew I wanted to use one of the Afghanistan pictures I took there, but I didn't know really which one it was until I went looking for it. And then I had to try to match up the elements after the fact to make sure. And sometimes I have to, you know, change it, flip it horizontally, flip either the model or something else horizontally or to make it work, and change the color of the light. And it just, the more you know in advance and the more, once again, you can picture and you know exactly what it's going to look like, the easier it is to do.
Right. And the only last comment that I put on here was just your work is so good, and it's so fun to see the creativity, and it really gets me inspired to, I mean, a lot of this is stuff that most of us already have most of the equipment to do this. Like you said, there's a few things, you know, maybe you don't have that, you know, the shutter release mechanism, or maybe you don't have, you know, some of the off-camera flash items and so forth, but most of us have that, or there's ways to get that stuff for not super, you know, really high on the expense list or whatever and so forth. But most of us already have the things that we can do it. All I need is to get the creativity that would get me to the point of creating something like you have. But it really is inspiring to see what really the opportunities that are out there in the digital photography world, and really appreciate it.
You know, I rewrote my artist statement a couple of years ago, and I tried to think about what it is that I consider to be successful in doing the pictures. And I finally came down to, sometimes I think a success to me is if I do a picture and somebody smiles, to me that's success. It isn't necessarily getting 4,000 likes on something. I really don't care. It's nice to get them. I enjoy it, but it's, you know, it's really, if somebody smiles or somebody enjoys it, and I do it mostly for me, I'm not doing it for anybody else. It's nice. I should get better at trying to sell something, but you know, I mostly do it because I enjoy it. It's fun. And the equipment, you said, it's so easy. I mean, if you've got a camera with a timer, you're there. You could do this.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you can just tell the how much fun you're having with it, just with the enthusiasm that comes out. The enthusiasm in your presentation, but it really shows in the images themselves too. So.
No, thank you.
Yeah, these were awesome, Dale. Thanks so much for you know, presenting to the club, and like you said, keep us informed if you do another workshop outdoors. I'm sure we'll have a lot of people that'll be interested in coming to that.
Yeah, we'd like to do a different location, not necessarily, not City Park or something, but it's some kind of different location maybe. So if people have got suggestions, please let me know.
Yeah, well, what kind of environment are you looking for? Like a park-like environment or something else?
Well, one idea I had, and I don't know it's even possible, but I thought about if we could even get like maybe some of these historic like bed and breakfasts that if you could rent them for an afternoon or something. I mean, there's one in my neighborhood, is Castle Marn. Unfortunately, they sold it. It used to be owned by a family that it was a bed and breakfast, and now I don't know what it is. But if you had some, some really kind of older or neat building that you could do things in, I think it'd be great fun. So,
Yeah, I think
what do
down
you
here,
want to shoot?
yeah, down here, there's the Highlands Ranch Castle.
Yes.
I think you can rent that, but have to be something to look into.
What we did last time, I envision doing again this time, is nobody made any money from this except the models. So if we were to do it again, it would be, if we had to rent a place to do it, it obviously the cost of the rental plus cost of models split among everybody who attends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, very good.
I want to have fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for organizing that one last year at City Park, and I hope to be able to attend whatever one that comes up this year. We had a great time.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you guys came. It was great.
Well, I guess we'll ask one more time. Any more questions? I see a lot of positive comments from everybody, but unless people have more questions, we'll let everybody go and have a good evening.
Okay. Well, thank you guys.
You bet.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Dale.
much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dale, and thank you everybody else too for the attendance tonight, Matt, on St. Patrick's Day. So
Yeah.
have a good evening.
Have a good evening, everybody. Bye.
One person in green.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.